Welcome to Phrasal Verb Practice. This is the place to learn real English, one phrasal verb at a time. My name is Marissa, and I'll walk you through this learning journey. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing great. Today, we're diving into the phrasal verb bring up. So, let's talk about how we actually use bring up in real conversations. This phrasal verb has a few common meanings, and they show up a lot in daily life. First, let's start with talking about topics. When we say bring up, we mean mentioning or introducing a topic into a conversation. For example, she brought up an important question in the meeting. I didn't want to bring up the problem again. He brought up his concerns during the call. Now, there's another meaning that's very common, especially when we talk about family. We also use bring up when we talk about raising children. So, when we say someone was brought up in a certain way, we're talking about how they were raised. For example, she was brought up by her grandparents. They brought up their kids to be respectful. He was brought up in a small town. There's one more meaning you should know. We use bring up when something causes memories or emotions to come back to the surface. Basically, a comment or a situation can bring up feelings. For example, that story brought up old memories. The comment brought up a lot of emotions. Talking about the past brought up mixed feelings. So, the idea here is simple. All the meanings of bring up are about causing something to appear. It can be a topic, it can be how someone was raised, or it can be a feeling. Now, let's quickly hear how bring up sounds in other languages. In Spanish, it's like mencionar or criar. In French, you'll hear mencionner or élever. In Portuguese, mencionar or criar. In Italian, mencionare or crescere. In German, ansprechen or erziehen. In Japanese, wadai ni dasu or sudateru. And in Chinese, tichu or fuyang. People usually use bring up in a few clear situations. For example, when they start talking about a topic. When they want to talk about a concern or problem, when they talk about how someone was raised, or when something triggers emotions or memories. Now let's hear a few examples to pull everything together. She brought up the issue during the meeting. This is about a topic. He was brought up in a very strict family. This is about childhood. That question brought up a lot of emotions. This is about feelings. I don't want to bring up the past again. This is about mentioning. They brought up their children with strong values. This is about raising kids. Now let's talk about grammar in a simple way. The phrasal verb bring up is separable. So here's what that means. You can say bring up the topic, or you can say bring the topic up. Both are correct. Structure. Bring up plus object. Bring plus object plus up. Here's the key point. When you use a pronoun, it goes in the middle. So we say, she brought it up. He brought them up. Now let's practice. First, you'll hear a short text about everyday life. Then, you'll hear another text in a professional or office situation. Are you ready? Let's start. It was a relaxed Sunday afternoon, and my family was sitting around the table after lunch, not really in a hurry to do anything. We were just talking when my sisters suddenly brought up an old family trip we took years ago. That simple comment immediately brought up memories I hadn't thought about in a long time. As we kept talking, my mom brought up how different things were back then and how we were all brought up with very simple rules at home. Hearing her talk about that brought up a mix of emotions, mostly good ones, and it made the conversation feel more personal. Later, I went for a walk with a friend. We talked about work, life, and random plans until she carefully brought up a problem she'd been dealing with. I could tell she had been waiting for the right moment to bring up the topic, and once she did, it felt like a relief. Talking about it brought up some worries, but it also helped her feel less alone. In the evening, I called my grandparents. During the call, my grandfather brought up stories about how he was brought up as a child. Those stories always bring up a sense of perspective for me and remind me where our values come from. Before going to bed, I thought about the day. It was interesting how simple conversations can bring up so many feelings, memories, and thoughts. Sometimes you don't plan to bring up certain topics, but they appear naturally. And when they do, they can help you understand people better, including yourself. By the end of the day, I realized that the things we bring up in everyday life often matter more than we expect. Great, that was the first text. How many times did you hear the phrasal verb of the day? Now, let's move on to the second text. The day started with our weekly team meeting, and the room felt a little tense. Everyone knew there were a few issues we needed to talk about, but no one wanted to be the first to speak. After a short silence, our manager brought up the missed deadline and asked us to be honest about what went wrong. I could tell some people were hesitant to bring up problems, but once the conversation started, it became easier. One teammate decided to bring up a data issue that had been slowing us down for weeks. As soon as she shared it, others nodded, and someone else brought it up again with more details we hadn't seen before. After the meeting, I sent a follow-up email to summarize the discussion. I made sure to bring up the main concerns clearly without pointing fingers. That message helped keep everyone aligned and avoided confusion later in the day. During lunch, the conversation became more relaxed. A colleague casually brought up how he was brought up in a family business and how that shaped the way he handles responsibility at work. That comment brought up memories for others too, and for a moment, the team felt more connected. In the afternoon, a new challenge came up with a client request. Instead of ignoring it, my manager encouraged us to bring up any risks early. I carefully brought up the timeline concern, and the team appreciated the honesty. Another teammate brought up a few possible solutions, and together we adjusted the plan. Before the day ended, we had a short wrap-up call. Our manager brought up lessons learned from the project and reminded us to bring up feedback whenever something doesn't feel right. As we logged off, it was clear that open conversations work best when people feel comfortable to bring up issues, ideas, and even doubts, instead of keeping them to themselves. Great, that was the second text, and that's all for today. Thank you so much for following this channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.